your city. It's your man, Big Pat, the voice of your Charlotte Hornets, and you're listening to the All Hornets Podcast Network, presented by Sports Illustrated.
It's done.
Connor McDavid! It's not real!
The goal of the year,
Panarin!
part of the past. The celebrations, forgotten. The history,
Vegas Golden Knights!
history. We're back to a blank slate. Clean ice. All that matters now is what happens next. The Stanley Cup playoffs.
Eastern Conference Final begins Wednesday.
Jewelry isn't a gift you give just once. It's a way to remind your loved one of a beautiful moment every time they see it. Blue Nile can help you find the gift that says how you feel and says it beautifully, with expert guidance and a wide assortment of jewelry of the highest quality at the best price. Go to BlueNile.com and experience the convenience of shopping Blue Nile, the original online jeweler since 1999. That's BlueNile.com to find the perfect jewelry gift for any occasion. BlueNile.com.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
You are listening to Inside the Hive on the All Hornets Podcast Network. One podcast feed with multiple shows, making sure we cover the Charlotte Hornets from every angle. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. The All Hornets Podcast is affiliated with the Fans First Sports Podcast Group. Today's show, we are doing an 11 in 60, long overdue April 2024 edition. We will be talking through all 9 current Hornets rotation players and adding in LaMelo Ball and Mark Williams now that their season is definitely done for LaMelo Ball and most likely done for Mark Williams. So 11 players in 60 minutes. We'll be doing about 5 minutes on each player. And then when we reach our time limit, you will hear our good old friend MC Hammer.
Hammer time!
And that will be code for us to move on to the next player. So this is a good little fun show that we like to do to kind of zoom in and kind of hit each player, hit some of the key points in each of the guys. Sorry for those who missed the podcast last week. As you can probably still tell from my voice a little bit, I was pretty unwell last week. I am recovering, but my voice is a little slower to recover than I am. So I've given, we are doing 11 and 60, and Chase is doing the extra player today to try and help out my voice a little bit. So Chase, sorry I cancelled last week. I was not doing too hot, but hopefully you've been keeping yourself busy watching some March Madness here over the last week or so.
Do not worry about it at all. I'm sure on behalf of both myself and the listeners, we hope that you are now feeling better, at least, even if some of the effects are still lingering a little bit. But I definitely kept myself busy. There has been wall-to-wall basketball Thursday through Sunday for the last couple of weeks, which obviously for someone like us who, on top of having an NBA podcast, we also have an NBA draft podcast that will be starting again pretty soon. Mm-hmm. That is more than enough for me to entertain myself for a weekend. So I've been having a good time watching these March Madness games, even if my bracket is like historically bad for this season. But on to next year in that regard. But we still got 2 more weekends left of basketball.
Yeah. I can't lie. I've been last week and a half. I have been prioritizing watching college basketball with our draft show starting soon and with the state of the Hornet season being what it is and the players that have been there. So I've been catching up a little bit actually just this past Easter weekend on some of the Hornets games that I've missed. But There's been a lot to go on. The question is, Chase, is DJ Burns on your big board? Yeah, is he making your top 100?
I will tell you this: if I were to make a G League player big board, he would be number one, like comfortably in like a golden tier by himself, like with Victor Wembanyama in last year's draft. Like he is, for what it's worth, going to be the most fun, like non-NBA pro basketball player, or maybe pro football player. I don't know if anybody saw that the last couple of days. Apparently there are NFL scouts that are looking at him on top of the NBA scouts.
He's too graceful to play football. He's like so
way too great. Oh yeah,
like no,
he's too skilled. He's too good for that. No, stay off the field, stay healthy, don't hurt your legs or your brain. Just play basketball, ball out in the G League, overseas in Europe or in China or the NBL or whatever it is that he chooses to do. Just make a ton of money being like the non-NBA version of Jokic, basically. Just like a bowling ball that has eyes in the back of his head. It's like he's so fun to watch.
I mean, this was old ownership, but the Hornets always did sign normally like a local, college guy, whether it be your Leaky Black, your Marcus Page. I'm sure I'm forgetting one or two others out there who've been there over the year.
They always bring in like local connections, even if it's like people from there too. Like I think DJ Burns is from South Carolina too.
Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Like a half hour away. There we go.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll look forward to seeing him on this year's Summer League team. But
shout out to any of our fans that are also NC State followers as well. Congratulations. I'm sure this is a huge couple of weeks for you. Definitely go Wolfpack. Easily my team left out of the last four. So I'm rooting for all of our NC State alum listeners.
I don't normally say this, and I very loosely follow this college team, but there is a college team I claim to follow.
Ooh.
And there are two main reasons. Do you think anyone else follows Duke because of Gerald Henderson? Because I do. That's me. That is the reason I started, because the Hornets drafted Gerald Henderson from the year that he was at Duke, and I was like, that sounds interesting. Oh, it's in North Carolina, back when I was like getting into this, right? And found it interesting. And I didn't even know they were like the most hated freaking team in America at the time. And then at the same time, I found like a discount Duke jersey in a like vintage clothing store for like £5 at the time. I don't even think it's real, but that was like my first college basketball jersey that I owned. So I'm a Dookie. Apologies to everyone here, but very loosely. I dip my toe in every March, and I only have space for one major love, and that's the Charlotte Hornets basketball.
I mean, you definitely have the most unique reason for liking Duke basketball, and probably the most innocent reason for liking Duke basketball. Also, I feel like people will probably forgive you for that. The stars just happened to align when you walked into that store and grabbed that jersey on top of the Hornets drafting, or the Bobcats drafting Gerald Henderson. So I'm sure you're forgiven for your crimes.
Who did Terrence Williams play for? Because that draft, the Bobcats were between Gerald Henderson and Terrence
North
Williams.
Carolina, right?
Terrence Williams got drafted, I want to say, by the Nets, the New Jersey Nets at the time. And it was all a big 50-50 of who they should take. And they ended up taking Gerald Henderson, I thought.
I think he would. Yeah, I think Terrence Williams played for Louisville. He was like one of the.
That was it.
When they started to be good, like in the like late 2000s or like early 2010s or something. Yeah. Whatever year that was. Yeah, I think that's who he played for. Wow. Yeah, this is what a blast from the past. Gerald Henderson, Terrence Williams.
No, sorry. We're going down the rabbit hole. This is already going to be over 60 minutes, but we're going to keep the player section under. Right. 11 players, 60 minutes. I told you earlier how it works. Chase, LaMelo Ball is on the clock. We're going to start with him now. His season is officially done. Give us your thoughts on LaMelo Ball.
All right. So, unfortunately, was announced in the last few days. LaMelo Ball's done for the year. Only 22 games played. So, I mean, I guess now that he's done, finished the year, his fourth season at 23.9 points, 5.1 rebounds, 8 assists, and 1.8 steals per game. 43, 36, 87 shooting splits. This is technically a post All-Star break 11 and 60, because I believe our 9 and 60 was the pre-All-Star break version. LaMelo actually didn't even play post All-Star break, but since he is the most important member of this franchise, we obviously got to touch on it a little bit. And we've clearly seen the last of him so far. 22 games played, like I said, 58 combined in the last 2 seasons. Obviously, I think the quality of the team influences the decision to shut him down. I'm sure many people have probably inferred that as well. If the Hornets were in some sort of play-in battle, there might be a little bit more of an urge to get him back here, but they are not. The only unfortunate thing to me, like, we can litigate till the cows come home whether or not he's injury or prone. James did a great podcast probably a month ago with an expert doctor who's going to be able to litigate that at a much higher degree than any of us are. So obviously go back and listen to that if you want to hear takes on whether or not LaMelo needs to wear an ankle brace or the long-term implication of any of these injuries or whatnot. But at this point, like, what I actually care about isn't even the injuries. It's just he is missing vital time for his development. Like, your third and fourth seasons, those are really, really crucial years to be getting a lot of reps. And over the last 2 years, he has gotten extremely few reps. He's played far fewer games over the last 2 seasons than Gordon Hayward has, than many of the other like players in the league that are labeled as injury prone have. Like, LaMelo is definitely up there with those guys now. And I mean, he had improved in some really key areas, which just makes this all the more disappointing that he's not going to be able to come back. Like, we saw the better rim finishing. Like, we did that podcast talking about him. He was one of the best drivers in the league at one point before he went down with injury, obviously averaging a career high 23.9 points per game. He was at finishing at 1.1 points per possession on layups this year per synergy, after being well below 1 point per possession on those play types in years past. Not stronger like physically, but definitely more willing to absorb contact. And his true shooting percentage was 56.1%, also a career high. Like, just more efficient, traded in like some of those bad shots at times, at least, for better ones. It's just, at least earlier in the season, we had talks about whether or not we thought he might be like fully locked in on defense now. Like, probably the best moment of the season was him clamping Tyrese Halliburton to win the game and then punting the ball into the bench. Like, that was before things really went sour. And I mean, we didn't really get to see a whole lot after that, but he just improved in some really key areas and didn't really get to show a whole lot of it or get to expand on it in any way. And then that was pretty much it. So, I mean, unfortunately, like, the narrative is going to revolve around his health, but like, we had a really good chance for it to not be that way. But it was just as unlucky of a year injury wise for him as it was last year, if not even worse. So yeah, very unfortunate.
Like, I think everyone does forget the first 5 games of the year, LaMelo Ball was downright horrible. Like, he was missing absolutely everything, inefficient, was one of the reasons the Hornets got off to that bad start. And then he flipped it on, right? He had that 10-game stretch where he was playing the best basketball probably of his career over a 10-game stretch there. And those like 2 extremes are just so, like, you would have probably seen a much better idea of like, well, what is the average here, right? The first 5 games are coming off this ankle injury. I do just like, I almost want to kind of discount the kind of some of the numbers we see this year because it's a 15-game sample. If you took a 15-game sample of anyone this season, you could probably go, oh, they've got a lot better or got a lot worse than that. And then you look at the whole season and you go, oh, actually, like, that was just a bad stretch or a hot start. Like, so I don't even know what to give to the numbers, but I agree with you what you say. The biggest issue, even if you do or don't think he's injury prone or whatever it is, it's just missing out that time on the court, that time with Brandon Miller, that time to develop, that time to learn, do things. It is a major bummer. And if LaMelo Ball gets one more long-term injury, this whole fan base is going to turn on him. Like, if he hurts his knee in the summer, if he breaks a wrist, breaks a finger, anything like that next season and misses another 30, 40 games, this fan base is going to turn quicker than you and me can say LaMelo Ball. So he's under a little bit of pressure right now, I think, from the fan base guys.
I completely agree. I mean, I saw people saying that, just to add one last thing, I saw people saying he might be one of the worst contracts in the league now. Like, that's quite a fall from what he was 2 years ago. But at this point, if you play 22 games a year, 58 in over 2 years, you really can't argue with it. So it's unfortunate, but it's the reality we live in.
Okay. Miles Bridges, averages since the All-Star break, 39 minutes per game. That is second, I believe, in the NBA since that time. He is right up there. So he's second in total minutes since the All-Star break. 20 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. I feel like you can probably copy and paste those stats like every month. Apart from the rebounding has been up, actually. Give him credit. The rebounding has been up recently. 0.3 blocks, 0.9 steals, 45% from the field, 30% from 3, 2.3 free throw attempts per game, 68% from the free throw line. Like efficiency has definitely been down a little bit, although that 45% field goal actually sounds a little better than how it's looked, I think, at times. The big thing I just want to talk about is, for me, the difference between Miles Bridges shooting off the catch and shooting off the dribble is like night and day. And the percentages give like a window into it a little bit, but I don't think tell a full story. But on unguarded catch and shoots for this season, Miles Bridges is 43.6%. On guarded catch and shoots, he's down, I think, at 35%. But he has double the attempts of guarded catch and shoots versus unguarded. And I think that's why we're seeing it looking so ugly. I think he's 32% on the year on dribble jumpers. So like anything off the dribble for Miles Bridges, I just automatically hate the shot, even if it goes in, because it's really flat. It always looks like he's off balance, like he has some really bad misses. And it's just not a good look for him. Now, he's been forced to take that a lot this season because he's having to force shots towards the end of shot clocks. There aren't as many other people around, but I still think in a role where he's able to just shoot catch and shoots and he's able to cut more off ball and attack the rim and still drive rim at times, playing next to like someone like LaMelo Ball, I still think there is a more conducive to winning player in there in Miles Bridges than we have been able to see this season. So that was the main bulk of like the thing that I wanted to talk about, was just that balance of shot making and decision making, which has been a real challenge. I think a couple of other things. I do think he struggles to read the backline defense. I mean, so often this year, there's been like 2 at the rim waiting for him, and he still forces up these like hook shots, which sometimes they go in and they look great. But there was, I think, one of the plays in the Cavs game where there was just like a wide open Davis Bertans in the corner, and Miles Bridges is like barreling in and just throwing up a like a pretty like low percentage look. He just can't read that like backside help defense when he's going on some of these drives. And that's one thing that I think he needs to be just a little bit more aware of, are those guys on spot ups and those guys fading out to the corners.
Yeah, so I have a trouble like really conceptualizing what his role is going to be on the team going forward. Because like you said, like I actually do think like he has some pretty obvious skills that can impact the team in a positive way. Like he can make open threes, catch and shoot threes at an extremely high clip. He attacks closeouts well. We thought that maybe some of that bounce was gone, but it's not fully back to what he was like before he missed the year last year. But he's definitely gotten in better game shape than what we saw like the first couple of weeks or months of the year, where he wasn't really exploding towards the rim in the same way. Now that seems to be back a little bit, so he can attack closeouts. He can make like that, like you said, like that easy like first read, but his feel for the game just really like lacks, I think, just overall, like on both ends of the court. I think it's much more apparent on defense than it is on offense, because he doesn't really have like a playmaker role or anything. He doesn't get like a ton of screens set for him and or like run out of handoffs or anything like that. He's mainly just like the end of action type of guy where he just finishes the play. But I don't think he has any capability to handle that going forward, which is why it's hard for me to like think of what he's going to be on this team specifically. Because like right now he is, I mean, with LaMelo out, he's obviously like the second best player, if not, the best player on the team. But if LaMelo's back and Mark is back and the team is fully healthy, he is realistically like the third option and maybe the fourth best player on the team when the team is at its peak. But he's not like, his current play style with the Hornets and with this roster and what he's been accustomed to over the last like 5 years of his career is not like a fourth option play style. So it's just hard for me to like think of where that like balance lies, like you said, like where, like, can you even meet that gap with the same team that you've kind of been a different player with for your whole career? Or do you need like a change of scenery to initiate that?
I think you can. I think it's catch and shoot threes. It is attacking mismatches and switches off the dribble. I think that is his role. Defensively, I agree with you. There's been a huge drop off there, and maybe that's because he's overtasked offensively. Okay, but like his block rate is dropped like half of his career average, just completely out the floor. So I do agree with the defense. I just think that there's more in there. On to you for Brandon Miller. We've run over 2 in a row. Let's get some time back, Chase. But this might not be the player to do it on.
I know. I was going to say I feel bad doing it to the guy who's probably or easily the brightest spot on the team right now. But Brandon Miller, at this moment, and what he'll probably finish the season at, is top 3 among all rookies in minutes played, field goals made, 3-pointers made, which he's first with 167. Total points, he's at 1,100 points this year. 7th in 3-point percentage, with by far the highest volume of anyone at the top other than Chet Holmgren. Like, clear-cut all-rookie first-team candidate in a year where Wemby and Chet are not battling for Rookie of the Year. He's probably the Rookie of the Year himself, like, or at least has the strongest candidacy for it. So when compared to his contemporaries, Brandon Miller has excelled in nearly every aspect this year. And that doesn't even really fall off when you compare him to like the entire NBA, especially since the end of the All-Star break or since the post-All-Star break, where you expect like some sort of rookie wall, like a 5 to 10 game stretch of like huge inefficiency where, I mean, he has had bad games littered in and out, but that's basically what everybody in the league has. Rookies are supposed to have like extended stretches where they struggle, and he just really hasn't had that for very long, at least. Like right now, and this was something that I thought like it like took me back a little bit when I first read it. His 5.1 catch and shoot attempts from 3 per game are 15th most in the entire league, which is more than Kristaps Porzingis and Sam Hauser, who are right below him, and is who are right below him, and he is right below Tim Hardaway. So he is in volume wise.
Nobody drawing attention.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
It's ridiculous.
It's like volume wise, he is legitimately, and efficiency matches up too. He's one of the best shooters in the league with nobody to play off of him, and with himself having to be at like right now, currently the best passer on the team. Like what he has done in the situation.
Like a word.
Well, right. That's probably fair. But like in terms of like the amount of time that they have the ball in their hands and their role and significance to the offense and whatnot, like Brandon Miller, like right now, is carrying a significantly higher load than really any other rookie in the league, maybe other than Wemby or Chet, I think. But even then, like those guys have, and in the case of Chet at least, have much better players around them. So, I mean, post All-Star break, when you expect some sort of drop off in efficiency, production, consistency, whatever, like there have been bad games, but there has not really been an extended stretch of poor play from Brandon Miller at any point in the year, which is the most impressive thing to me.
And let's not forget again, he sprains his ankle, maybe both ankles again.
Yeah, I think he's and hurt his back or something like that too.
Yeah,
like
just came straight back in the game. He was asked post game, "Are you like, how's the ankle feeling?" He's like, "Great, I'll be playing tomorrow." And when the Hornets are dealing with the likes of LaMelo Ball and Mark Williams, who've been out with, sprains or whatever it is for however long, ankle tendinopathy. We shouldn't call it a sprain. It's ankle tendinopathy and a lower back injury for Mark Williams. And Steve Clifford says it's one thing that he just admires about him, that he absolutely loves about him, is that he's able to, he has that toughness, like he will play through that. Both him and Miles Bridges have just been like absolute warriors this year, have been forced to do a lot, played huge, heavy minutes. So I just want to give a big shout out to like his toughness. And just sometimes like, this is the weird thing in the NBA. People twist an ankle and I never know if someone's going to be back in 5 minutes or back in 5 months. Like you see so many wide ranges and ankle twists and they all kind of look kind of similar. And the good news is he seems to have ankles that don't stiffen up or swell up too much, and he's able to go again the next day, which you can't under a stat sheet won't show that apart from games played at the end of the year, and that is one of the most important stats.
Some would argue it's the most important, and at this point, it's hard to argue with the results that the Hornets have gotten with many of their good players not being among the league leaders in games played over the last couple of years. But yeah, he has been truly incredible. I will say he hasn't necessarily like improved, I guess, as the year has went on. It's kind of just been more of the same, but I think that speaks way more to how well adjusted he came into the league and how much trust he earned from Steve Clifford, like basically right off the bat, especially defensively. Like he doesn't really he takes challenges. He doesn't hide in any way. He doesn't guard bad players at any point. Like he was guarding Paul George for that whole Clippers game and had a smile on his face the entire time. Like he's definitely kind of nuts, which I like about him. Like that you need somebody that's a little bit insane, and he's definitely a little bit insane.
He is, and he may not have got better when you look at the stats over the course of the season, but you look at how other teams are guarding him and who they're guarding him with. Okay, he's getting double teamed almost nightly in the second half of the season. He was not the start. There's been real growth in that area. So even though the stats have stayed consistent, the gradient of difficulty has got so much harder. Okay, moving on. Grant Williams, since since the All-Star break, 20 minutes per game, 12.7 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, just under a steal, half a block, 48% from the field, 34% from three. Interestingly, Grant, 50% of his minutes have come at center so far, just because of Mark Williams' injury, because of the lack of impact of Marquez Bolden and of Nathan Mensah, and Pokusevski playing more power forward, which is maybe slightly interesting. We'll talk about that later. Really interesting. At center, the Hornets are scoring 117.5 points per 100 possessions with Grant Williams. With him at power forward, they scored 99 points per 100 possessions. That is an 18-point swing between him being at the 5 and him playing power forward. That is just pretty remarkable and goes to show the impact of 5-out spaced offense in the NBA is just very alive and real. He has been, I think, like his 3-point percentage while playing center, if you could filter things to show that, I think that would be very interesting because I think that would probably show him to be doing very well. But and the defense for those two lineups, for those wondering, it's basically been a wash. It's been the same. Okay. So they've scored at a much better rate and the defense has been pretty much the same. So that is huge, not just for this year, but like moving forward, knowing that you have a potential small ball stretch 5 option that you can use where maybe teams downsize against you or try and stretch you out. Very interesting. His usage is at 19%, which for Grant Williams is about double what he had in both Boston and Dallas. So they're asking Grant to do a lot. The most that anyone has ever asked Grant to do anything in the NBA. And like I say, the 3-point percentage, you probably hope that to be a little bit higher. But teams are wanting to take that away and challenging to do other things. And through some of that usage, we've found some of that post game, which has been good to see, like the playmaking from the post, some of the turnarounds, the fadeaways, the spins. I did an article on like Grant Williams rediscovering his post game on SILHornets.com. You can go read that now. And he's one of those players that you look at all the stats. His rebound rate's terrible. His block rate isn't good. Throw it all away. Like, you watch the games. He's boxing everybody out. He's in good position, making people finish over him. He does so many things that just do not appear on the stat sheet. I know that's a cliche, but in this case, it is just true. But you need to look at his impact. You need to watch the games to see and feel Grant Williams' impact. And that's something that I really think you've seen. He's a great communicator. He's a good connective passer. I think he is, I said this back in the summer, he is a much better fit for what this team needs than PJ Washington. Although PJ Washington is maybe the more exciting, more explosive player, I think it is a home run just to swap those two. I would do that trade just to swap those two. Never mind the first round pick that you got on top of that. So a real home run of a trade so far. I just hope that when he scales down and roll next year, we can get the same level of production.
I think the best way to encapsulate like Grant Williams as a player is just the phrase like everybody has a place in the NBA. Like it doesn't matter like what type of player you are. Like if you just find the right role on the right team and the right time, which is the particularly important part, like you will be able to carve out a role for however long. And Grant is the exact example of that. Like he's doing a lot of things that he was never asked to do in Dallas. Like I'm glad you brought up the usage because I was going to do the same thing. He is 80th percentile among players at his position in usage rate right now.
Crazy.
Like 8 out of 10 players in the NBA, Grant handles the ball or finishes a possession with a shot, assist, or turnover than them. Like that is just an insane way to use Grant Williams, but it's working because he and his play style and the type of person that he is and the intangibles he brings to the floor are the exact type of things that the Hornets needed and that they sorely lacked prior to that trade. And yeah, he may not be shooting like quite as well as he always has, but he can shoot. Like that's why teams guard him that way. And right now, like for what the Hornets are, like he's taking advantage of that and he's helping the team in pretty much every regard. Like he didn't do that in Dallas. He didn't do that at the end of his career in Boston, but he's certainly doing it now in Charlotte. So Grant has been a massive bright spot in this second half of the season.
All right, over to you, Mark Williams.
All right, so another guy who coincidentally did not appear post All-Star break due to injury, but we're going to have to talk about him because his season is he hasn't officially been announced that his season is over, if I'm correct, but I mean, there is almost certainly no chance that he's going to play.
I don't know why they didn't.
Right. It would have made sense to do
news
that
over in one day. Why string this
Right.
along? I don't understand it. Again, I'm just continue to be befuddled by the Hornets' injury communication management.
Right, and he only played 19 games this year. 19. So, like, whatever you're going to get out of it, like, the sample size that you're going to get is going to get to what? 25, 26 games? Like, what do you really gain from a 26-game Mark Williams season as opposed to 19? Nothing. Like, absolutely nothing. Like, so I don't really get why that is the case either, but here we are at what we can presume is the end of Mark Williams' season. He averaged 12.7 points, 9.7 rebounds, 1.2 assists, 1.1 block per game. In his what were very low minutes this year, his 10.6 point differential was the highest on the Charlotte Hornets. The biggest number that jumped out to me, he was 5th in the league in paint touches per game at 19.4. His 18th in field goal percentage at 64.9%. Like one of the top 15, 20 most efficient finishers in the paint that the NBA has to offer right now. So far better offensive big than he was given credit for at Duke when coming into the draft. He's shown some touch on finishes, not just like dunking the ball and finishing easy layups, rolls into open space, good hands and catch radius, like very long, limber, mobile guy. A bit more like passing flashes from the elbows and wings than we may have thought. He seems like to be a pretty good bounce passer to baseline cutters when he's got the ball faced up at the elbow, but not really like a very skilled player offensively right now. To me, like,
remember Steve Clifford?
Yeah,
He promised.
I remember.
He promised that 3-point shot next season in his rookie year. Let's just take. And then we asked him about that on media day. He was like, "So last year you said Mark will be shooting threes this year," and he was like, he might take them, and it will have. And he stuck his head. It'll have no impact on how good a year he has. And it was like, oh, so because you said it last year, Steve. That's why we asked.
Yeah, he definitely set himself up for that, and probably forgot that he had mentioned that also, and was like, God damn it, they really got me on this one. But yeah, I mean, the offense is like one thing. To be a non-shooter is totally fine when he's that good of a finisher in the paint. Just needs more volume and more games played, obviously. But
I do think the defense. Look, we talked about it at the time.
The defense is my big thing right now.
That's like you can be a non-shooter, and you can be a good rim finisher as long as you're able to hold it down in the other end. And like his offensive rebounding was better than his defensive rebounding from memory. Like he crashed the glass well. His total rebound numbers look good, but his defensive rebounding can look better. And like 1.1 blocks for a 7'2" guy with that wingspan, you need to be affecting and impacting the game more. And guys seem to get their body into him and move him. And he seemed to the whole team, to be fair, to start the season defensively was just disorganized. I talked about this before at the start of the season. They were not ready to play. Like Mark found himself out of position at times, looking around at cutters behind him. Like people weren't communicating. I don't think he was deployed or used in a way that really got the best out of him. And that's something that I think going forward to next year, for him to be an impact player, he needs to be a huge rim deterrent behind LaMelo Ball. And that's how they need to deploy him. And that wasn't something that he had a real success with in the short number of games that he did play this year.
I mean, there's an argument right now that among players of his size and stature, like basically any 7-footer in the NBA, like he might be one of the least physical of those players in the league right now. That's not like a Poku type, like oversized wing. Like Mark just really does get worked like anytime they play like a really big guy. He's matched up against the smaller guys a little bit better, but I'm in total agreement with you. He needs to be a much better rim protector and deterrent than he has shown in, albeit very limited minutes this year.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become? Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at marines.com.
Trey Mann, 31.5 minutes per game. He is at 12 points, 4.5 rebounds, just under 5 assists, 1.6 steals. We've talked about his active deflections before. 1.5 turnovers, so over a 2-to-1 turnover ratio, which is good for your shooting guard. 46% from the field, 36% from three. I think one underrated thing about Trey Mann is just his consistency. Like, I feel like you know exactly what you're getting from Trey Mann each game. And that is almost like those averages that you get there. It's like a 10, 5, and 5, 11, 12, like 5 and 5 line, basically every game, which is, pretty hard to do in the NBA, especially when you've not played that much time. You'd expect more swings, misses. I think you know what you're getting. This has proved to me that he is a rotation player, a bench rotation player, rather than a starter. He is not the replacement of Terry Rozier, in my opinion. I think he very rarely looks sped up or looks like off kilter with what he's doing. Plays to his strengths massively. I think that's one thing you can definitely see from Trey Mann. Limits his mistakes. I think you can see that in his efficiency, his shooting numbers, his assist to turnover ratio. But I also feel like because he plays within himself, he limits his own impact on the game. And when he tries to force things, like there's a play in that Cavs game where he went for a step back pull up 2-point shot, which normally Trey Mann doesn't do that. Like he sometimes does it from beyond the arc if he's got the right matchup, but he doesn't normally take a ISO mid range jump shot. It's not something that he really did. But like when he tries to kind of get off his very straight line tracks of what he does, it doesn't look great. And I think that like pull-up shot was like a really ugly, barely hit the rim. So he plays to strengths, which is something smart players do, but he is relatively limited in what those strengths are. Like he's good attacking the rim at times. He has a step back 3-point shot, which when he gets to can be good. And he can drop it off to that kind of like big to that screener relatively well on the pick and roll. The defensively, I've just been really impressed. The deflections, the field, the rebounding, like he's an actual like proper two-way player. And that's almost like what I think I've been most impressed with that I just wasn't expecting. Because he's slight, he's small, he's not especially long, he's not especially thick. But he really makes his impact felt defensively. The idea of, I think, when he came in, we were like, will he play point guard? Is he a 1? Is he a 2? Like, the question is so obvious now. He is clearly a 2. When he's played point, the team has an offensive rating of 102 points per game. With Micic, in that time, it's 118 per game. Like, now, I think that just tells you everything you need to know, right?
That answers that question.
To generate good offense when Trey Mann is your full-time single ball handler. Yeah, that's my lot on Trey Mann.
I think Trey Mann's defense has been my favorite post All-Star break, like storyline or discovery, I guess is probably the better term. Like, it seems like it kind of came out of nowhere. Obviously, he wasn't like a high minute guy in Oklahoma City, but he definitely did not have this reputation of being like an active defender in this way. And that's what deflections like indicates. It's like a direct implication on your like activity and like just your ability to read passing lanes and just be involved in the game defensively. He has made a huge impact on that end since he got here. And like you mentioned, he's got some very like reliable tools in his bag as an offensive player, like really good ball screen playmaker. Not much of a playmaker outside of that, but he can make lob passes. He makes dump offs, like pocket passes, can make like the corner kickouts and skip passes every now and again. Like he really just does what you need him to do, and he does it well. And it's hard to find players that do that like in a small role in the NBA. Like I've talked about role player consistency a million times. Like he is one of those guys that can actually just go out there and you can really rely on him to be the exact same player every single night. Like, and that's a good player too. So there's a lot of value in players like Trey Mann on your team.
The low hanging fruit for him is the step back threes. Like in OKC, he was in the 40s of his like frequency. Like I think he was like 45, 46%. And this year his volume has dropped down to 34 with Charlotte. And this is a team, desperate for 3-point scoring, for shooting. So maybe it's a coaching thing. Maybe it's something he's been pressured by Steve Clifford. But I'd like to see him go to that step back 3-point shot because that was one of the big selling points of him as a prospect in OKC.
All right. We are on to Vasilije Micic. For me, I mean, technically this is his first NBA season, but we're not really going to evaluate him like he is some sort of like young, inexperienced player. We've got what we've got with Micic. To me, the biggest question right now is when or if his shot is going to come around in the NBA game. He's historically been like a good shooter in the EuroLeague, and he's still over 80% from the line, far under 30% from three in the NBA. Like, even without that, though, he has enough juice as a passer and creativity finishing at the rim and making plays at the rim to get by without it. But to like truly be like a long-term number 2 for LaMelo, I think he's going to have to shoot it at like a league average percentage. But I mean, I think there's a chance that comes around. It's his first year in the NBA. He just has to adjust to like the pace and the speed and the physicality or lack thereof compared to where he used to be in the league. And that's not like a thing that you like get better or worse at necessarily. Like you kind of just jump in and just need to get your feet wet in that regard. And he's doing that right now to a much greater degree, or with much more volume at least, than he was with OKC. So I have like a lot of faith that actually is going to happen. If he got like a full season next year as like the second or third guard in the Hornets lineup, that he would be a good shooter and then be like a perfectly fine backup for LaMelo long term. They've got him. I do too. And they've got him on a long-term deal. I think that's next year and the year after that as well. at $7 million, very tradable salary, like also easy to keep around and not have to worry about your backup point guard slot, like taking up a large percentage of your team's cap or anything like that. So have definitely
I believe you, Micic. I believe you. Can we turn that into a t-shirt? I believe you, Micic.
I like that. I like that with the J at the end too.
Yeah. Here, so Vasilij Micic in the Clippers game had how many assists was it? Was it 13 assists? Oh, it got downgraded. It was at 14. Here's my question to you. Trivia time. Who is the last Hornet to have more than 13 assists in a game?
Devontae Graham.
It's a good guess, but you're incorrect.
I wanted that to be right so bad.
You know what? If it wasn't for this player, you would have been correct. Apart from LaMelo Ball, I should have said, by the way. It is Teo Maledon against the Raptors on the 2nd of April last year. He had 14 assists and 8 points, 8 rebounds. There you go. Teo Maledon. Shout out.
I'll be honest. I have legitimately zero memory of that happening at all. Like none.
That was April basketball. This is what happens. It doesn't really exist. Technically it does matter. But it doesn't really matter when you're like the Hornets are right now.
That is wild. I would never have guessed that in a bazillion years. That is so crazy. So Devontae does have a game with 13 assists, though. Off topic, but I just
Devontae has 15 assists.
Okay, I was going to say I could have sworn that he had like a super high
franchise record. Nick Batum with 16.
Dime dropper was that? How about that? That's $25 million a year, and you're hating on 16 assists
today. That's enough. Anything else on Vasilij?
I don't think so. I'm just very interested to see where he fits on this team going forward, or what the front office would say if you ask them that question. Like, do they view him as a trade piece or a rotation player or what? But only one way to find out, and that's to see what happens this summer.
Yeah, I think he'll be back next year. Okay, moving on. Nick Richards, 28 minutes per game, 11 points, 9 rebounds, 1 assist, half a steal, 1 block, 67% from the field, 1.2 turnovers. This is going to be a quick one, Chase. I really don't know I was really struggling for like something to unearth here and tell you about Nick Richards. He just looks the same guy. Hasn't really improved as the year has gone on. Like, you maybe think that, okay, now you've been the starter for longer and you're used to playing in the starting units. Obviously, it's not a great lineup for him. There's not a lot of shooting. There's not a lot of space. All those things that you have to say to, which doesn't make it easy for him to succeed. But he's just kind of out there at times. And he goes for like these long stretches where he just seems to be like out the game on both ends. He still has this physical bustle center. Like, he definitely has that. But I've been disappointed with his rim protection this year. I've been disappointed with his offensive rebounding and his foul rate on the offensive end. Like, they've all dropped this year, and I think that's something to do with playing high minutes and not getting into foul trouble. But here's my question to you. I want to use this as a segue, really, to talk about Nick Richards in the center position. Do you think the Hornets should go into next year with Mark Williams and Nick Richards as their two centers, like their top 2 centers on the roster?
No, I've felt this way for a while, and I'm glad that you actually asked me that because, for as much as I think Nick has carved a career path as a backup center, as like a rim runner, like defensive rebounder type guy, I just feel even stronger that the Hornets should look for a different matchup at the 5. I feel like this season is a perfect example. Mark played 19 games, I think I said. I think we got more flashes or more growth in whatever small areas out of that than we've seen from Nick this year. And I understand there are different stages in their career, but he hasn't added really anything to his game. And he is a very low impact player, I guess is the way to put it. Like, he just gets you 10 and 8 by being a big physical guy that doesn't have a ton of skill, but is just available and knows where to fill in the gaps for a player at his position and role and size in the NBA. It's just very, there's
you put any guy of that size playing 28 minutes per game. Like, you telling me Bruno Fernando, Goga Batante, Jericho Sims, Bismack Biyombo, they could all give you those numbers if they were given the minutes that Nick Richards is. And I feel like the backup center market, we learned this in the NBA a long time ago, that it's pretty replaceable. And there's a lot of guys out there who can do that. And some of these games, even where he has like 14 and 11, looks great in the stat sheet. You watch the game, not meaningful, some of them. Some of them are, but like more often than not, they're a little bit empty calories. The points and the rebounds come when the game is completely off the line, out of reach. And for me, I didn't think they can go in with Richards-Williams, but I didn't think they should necessarily replace Richards. I didn't think you'll get a ton for him. It would be like, no, let's go in with a third center. And if we're in a position where Nick Richards isn't playing because this team's deep at center, then that is a good situation to be in. And let's have competition in training camp, and let's actually have depth. I think that's where I land on that. So that is my all for Nick Richards.
That part I actually agree with. If you're going to move him down the depth chart and get someone better than him, that would be perfect. Because then, I mean, he is no longer like his redundancy with Mark, I think, is what really is the biggest thing for me. He's just the exact same player, but worse at like quite literally everything. So there's just not really a reason to have a player like that on a team.
Not goaltends.
Yeah, that much is true. He's definitely better at illegally swatting the ball off of the rim or the backboard than Mark is, which it counts for something. I don't know if it's something positive necessarily, but it definitely counts for something.
Isaiah Hartenstein, Nick Claxton, Jonas Valanciunas, maybe in that order. Yeah. I think that's a real possibility this offseason, depending how these things go here. But Chase,
I would love a shooting big. That's it. No, go ahead. All right.
We've got time spare. Let's use it up. You go.
All right. Here we go. We'll use that. Technically, this is a shooting big. Maybe the replacement is in the building already. Davis Bertans, technically a shooting big. He is a tall man, but it's definitely not the center that the Hornets would be looking for in that regard if they were replacing Nick Richards. I mean, the shooting performances, like at this time in the year, a team that is not going to get the number one pick, or number one pick odds, I should say, but is also not going to even sniff the playoffs. Shooting performances like the one Davis Bertans are capable of, and if not, has at least put a couple of them down so far where he's made like 3 or 4 threes. These like can just breathe life into your Tuesday night at 8:15 p.m. when you're being like, what am I doing here right now? This is why, is because Davis Bertans can come flying off of a screen and basically throw like a one-handed runner from the corner, and it will just go straight down. And you will be like, okay, I'm back. Like you've reeled me back in. I'm here. And that is exactly what I have enjoyed about him so far. He's obviously like, I believe he's like 55%, 54.5% from 3 right now, which is even higher than it was when we talked about him a couple pods ago to talk about who the best shooters were in Hornets history. At that point, he was shooting the leather out of the ball, and it's gotten better since then, which is just insane how consistent he's been since the post All-Star break. But he is just like the perfect like player to have on your team that doesn't play but can play sometimes, and also has like a tradable salary. So that this is the type of DNP CD potential player that you want to have, because you can put him out there and he has a marquee skill, or you can move him this coming off season and his $17 million salary can be a lot more helpful in a trade than he may be on the court at a given time. So that is my Davis Bertans spiel.
Gardening glove Davis. That's what people are calling him now. Now his trainer in Latvia made him shoot with gardening gloves on and with an eye patch on. Awesome. Whatever they talked about, whatever Ash talked about on the broadcast.
I forgot about that, the gardening gloves.
That was just absolutely bizarre. Yeah, so, look, I think there's a chance Bertans is back next year. I just think there's like a lot of moving parts. It depends on Miles Bridges, depends on who they draft. It depends on how free agency goes. There's a lot of optionality with him, but yeah, I would be more than happy to have him at the end of your bench. You know, he's not worth the full size of his $15-16 contract, But the Hornets don't need to be worrying too much about that, and they can get out of it for I think like $5 million if they want to. But like, we have seen a few rough Davos games where like if he is not hitting shots, then he is actively hurting you like on both ends because plays are being run for him on offense, and then on defense he tries hard and his team defense isn't bad, but he can just be targeted. So he is a little bit, I would say, inconsistent on his impact. But is entertaining to watch at times, especially for this Hornets team to end the season. But let's move on from Davis Bertans onto Cody Martin. Cody Martin, who, again, we think he's been ruled out for the season now. Another one ruled out for the season. He's been played in total now 27 minutes per game, averaged 7.5 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.1 steals, half a block. Double the block rate of Miles Bridges, which is pretty wild. 1.6 turnovers, just 38% from the field, 31% from three. So shooting efficiency really struggling. Highest usage of his career, 18%. Not exactly easing Cody Martin back in after his long spell on the sidelines. It was like, everyone's injured. Cody, can you go play point guard? Was basically what happened. Playing him in a position he'd not really played that much in the NBA, asking him to take a lot of shots. I think that's why you've seen some of that shooting efficiency really drop because, Cody was having to take some go-to shots at the end of the shot clock, which is not what Cody's job CV should say in the NBA. It should be like toughy, gritty, defender, hustle guy with a little bit of playmaking, but you never want him to be taking a shot while being guarded by anyone, basically. I'm curious. What did you make of the point guard Cody Martin experience? The stats and the numbers all say it was good, and I think I was left like the eye test for me just showed it to be a little bit wanting. I mean, I don't think it's something this team would ever go to like on a if everyone was healthy basis, but I thought it was like a little bit not disappointing. I don't think it's something the team should ever look at when the roster is healthy. It's not something like, oh, I think there's more here. Let's explore it more next year. I think that was strictly a break glass in case of emergency, and there was one.
I agree with that. I definitely don't think it was like the internet hated it. That much I know. I think, were maybe a little bit sour on it, but
I heard
like
Duncan talking about how Cody Martin at point guard is. And I was like, I don't know, guys. You might have seen some of the passes because there were some lovely passes. There are also some really bad over dribbling, like slow the play down moments as well.
Yeah, I think the problem is that he struggles to play with like any sort of pace. Like he has no natural like ball handling feel. Like he's just a very technically sound, smart basketball player, and he like knows how to start a play. He knows where the ball is supposed to go, when it's supposed to be there, but he just doesn't really like operate in a way that like compromises the defense at all. Like it's just very predetermined, set read. If you can diagnose it as a defender, like you're going to stop it. And that's essentially like what happened. But oftentimes in the NBA, as Steve Clifford has harped upon, like players just don't have great feel for the game defensively. And that's where Cody comes in. Is he can really take advantage of that. And that's where a lot of his nice passes were just like finding creases in the defense. Like Nick comes up and sets a screen. He takes like a hang dribble and ropes some one-handed bounce pass, like down into the paint, and Nick gets an easy dunk. Like those are valuable plays. It's good. Like it takes skill and basketball knowledge to do that, but it's just not something that you need at like a high volume at all, or something that's going to produce good offense at a high volume at all. It is very much a break glass in case of emergency thing. Like you do that with him at the 3 as your backup, like, and just run it like 2 or 3 times a game. Like when LaMelo, your 2 guard, and Brandon Miller are all sitting, like that's the type of thing it is. But we just had to do it for
too many minutes.
Weeks? Like I think probably like 2 weeks maybe of like real games worth where he was like the best playmaking ball handling option on the team if you weren't going to take Brandon Miller out of his role. But
let's not forget when he came back they played him too many minutes, and then he went out at
Yeah.
the end with like knee soreness, and Steve Clifford even like admitted it. He was like, "It's my bad." And the fact that the team let him play too many minutes, like the team should have had better control on that. The medical staff should have been looking at Steve Clifford and going, "This guy has just been out 18 months. You are not paying him more than like his allocated minute return. Like this will put him back." And they didn't do that, and I think that goes to show some of the problems that staff have had. The one thing I will say is I still saw that he was probably the best positional, like pound for pound defender on this team.
Mhm.
And from when he was healthy, I still see him playing a role in this like roster moving forward. Like I think he is the battle next year between who could start but not next to Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. Like Cody Martin could be one of those options. Absolutely a very real possibility. I would not rule it out.
I feel like, and we'll end this on a positive note for Cody, who's had a pretty rough stretch of it injury-wise the last 2 years. I feel like the ideal version of him is very, very similar to like, but obviously in like a toned down version, but is very similar to what Derek White does for Boston right now. He doesn't have the like playmaking or pace or speed or quickness that White has, but just open threes, making plays, like pest on defense. That's what Cody can do for this team at his peak healthiness.
Alexei Pokusevsky, Chase, take us home.
All right, let's round it out with Pokumania. It proved to be more than a worthy experiment, I think, is my overall take. Like many teams could have done it. The Hornets were the one that like took that chance, and I think this is the perfect type of guy to take a chance on at the end of the year. The thing that I thought, I mean, I guess at this point it's kind of impressive, but I thought when it first happened, I was just like, of course it's happening this way. They wanted him to play in the G League originally because people forget he broke his leg with Oklahoma City. Like it wasn't like I sprained my ankle. Like he fractured his leg and missed like 6 weeks or whatever it was. They wanted him to kind of like ease back into it a little bit, but as we all know, with how the Hornets have been injury-wise the last couple of years, there's no such thing as that. Someone got hurt like right away and he needed to play like instantly. And he's basically just been playing ever since. And while I think he is kind of the same player that he was with OKC, like inefficient, poor shooter, like takes a lot of ill-advised shots, passes, just does a lot of ill-advised things, I guess, in general, really on both ends of the court. But the intrigue is still there. Like the play in the last game against the Clippers, he had that behind the back into a crossover, into a reverse layup, like going all the way through the paint. Like guys at his size just don't do that fluidly very often. So it's hard to like let go of that, like when you really think about it. But I think the totality of him has yet to prove that he is an NBA player really in any regard. But again, like that's the type of player the Hornets should be taking a chance on, is just see if you can be the team that makes those flashes happen a little bit more often, or often enough to where he can make an impact, or maybe add some like ancillary skills. But I mean, whether or not that happens going forward, I have no idea, like whether or not he's going to be on the team next year. But at the end of the year, like now is the time to just kind of test the waters and see what Poku can add to his game.
He's actually been less wild than I thought he might be. My voice is really giving up, by the way. You can hear it.
We're an hour in. So I don't blame you at all.
It's like I've been smoking throughout this podcast and I've just finished my packet. It's been less wild than I thought. He needs to be able to shoot. Like for him to be work, as the idea of the play is, he's like a good switch beater because he can like dribble and take guys to the hole and finish around the rim. I thought he would play more center on this team. I thought that was the idea of like, oh, here's like you said, some different functional type of player different to the a la Mark Williams, Nick Richards. But no, they played him mostly power forward. I guess it's the defensive rebounding will put Steve Clifford off and the size at center and having Grant Williams there being another option. But look, I've enjoyed it. I think there's more there. I just think he's, like we said, he's still been getting up to speed. I think I've seen enough that I'd be curious to bring him back into camp next year, depending how things go this summer. I'd like to see him. He's ahead of JT Thor. We talked about JT Thor a lot for 2 years. He's way ahead of JT Thor. So that says everything that we need to say about JT Thor, I think, right now.
Yeah, I mean, we just did this 11-60. Did not talk about JT Thor until the very end, and talking about the absence of him from the lineup or anybody's thoughts really at this point. Which, I mean, tough go of it, but I completely agree with Poku being ahead of him in the rotation so far.
So do I. All right, Chase, that's going to do it. We have finished a minute early there. Pat on the back to me and you. We did well there. Look, there is not going to be many times that in April you're going to get a deep rundown of every single player who's playing minutes for the Hornets right now like we just did. So I want to say thank you, everybody, for listening in. I hope you all had a great Easter weekend break. Hornets basketball is almost over. We have 2 more episodes before we hit into our off-season side and we start moving into the draft show. If you're listening now, we appreciate you hanging with us. Keep enjoying some Hornets basketball. We should get to see some of the Amari Bailey minutes, Nick Smith minutes down the stretch here, I think. I think that's coming in the next few games. Last thing I want to finish in is screw the Spurs for shutting down Devin Vassell and Jeremy Sohan. To try and out-tank Charlotte. Just absolute straight blasphemy from the San Antonio Spurs right there when they're battling for the 3rd worst record in the league. How dare they slow down Victor? But that is it from me, Chase. My voice needs to rest. Thank you very much, and hopefully my voice will be back properly for next week.
The lottery gods will not reward those who try to rig the system.
No.
Thank you, everybody.